Well, it's 22 minutes away from 3 o'clock. Good to have you with us. I'm Gareth Edwards. Dan Moyane is away for today. Just a reminder, we're currently in stage 3 power cuts. We're going to be hurtling into stage 4 from 4 p.m. this afternoon. Now, today we're discussing sex trafficking cases. We know that they're underreported, they're undercounted for various reasons. However, on occasion, they are successfully reported on and thankfully prosecuted. Not enough, though. However, prosecutions for labour trafficking hardly ever occur. That's according to research by various organisations, including International Developmental Agency USAID. The study has also found that violence is regularly meted out by perpetrators of trafficking in persons, with meaningful intervention by law enforcement agencies extremely rare, hardly ever, and that's the point we're trying to make today. Now, when prosecutions do occur, the study, which we'll talk about now, confirms, and I quote, the indifference, corruption and complicity by law enforcement officials. Let's bring in an expert. Always good to have Dr. Marcel Van Der Ross from the University of the Free State with us. Doctor, good to have you on today on eNCA. So the research going into quite a lot of detail. I'm sure we'll unpack it over the next few days. For someone who hasn't read the research, give me the highlight, give me the headline from this.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, Gareth, to you and your viewers. Firstly, this report that was released yesterday was but the first of a much larger comprehensive national study, right? And the report released is really an analysis of reports, prosecutions in the criminal justice system. And it really starts out with questioning, firstly, historical research around the issue of human trafficking prevalence in South Africa, which has really fallen significantly short in providing an even-handed and a balanced perspective in terms of what is going on. As recent as 2 years ago, there was a study that was published that said, well, human trafficking is hardly encountered and that child trafficking is a myth. So that was quite mind-blowing. So what we set out in this specific report that I wrote was, well, let's go and look at existing data sources, albeit not always that easy to access. So we looked at media, we looked at reports from civil society organizations, 3 of them that's got a national footprint, then police statistics, ongoing court prosecutions for 2021, and an in-depth analysis of all successfully prosecuted cases. And it's a non-exhaustive list. And from that, we drew conclusions and we came up with our findings, yeah.
Let's talk about those findings as well, because I'm sure you deal with this on a regular basis as well. Is there one finding that stood out for you as well, that even somebody in this space with your expertise that made you sit up and pay attention, that you think the country needs to know about?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of those that we continually talk about is the massive undercounting, Gareth, of trafficking victims. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, researchers has played a large part in that, is using wrong definitions. You know, often you have people sharing, research participants sharing experiences that is exactly what trafficking is, and in those cases are not counted as trafficking. So that's the one part of it. You know, a big theme from all the sources was the incredible violence and the trafficking footprint in the commercial sex trade. It's massive. You know, we have these online adult websites, some of them reporting on public roadways, and we know very well that people use those websites to advertise their services. All of them implicated in sex trafficking and some cases child sex trafficking cases. So it's a massively compromised sexual exploitation landscape. You mentioned corruption and complicity. And there's just so many examples of that as well in successfully prosecuted cases, experiences from civil society, and a lot of this information coming back to the shortfalls of historical research has been documented as far back as the mid-90s. So then you see research coming out, but they're not citing historical studies, you know, and not grappling with the tension of access to specific data sources and what's already been published. And I think researchers has got a major role to play in being, transparent in research methods
well,
and
beyond,
be
beyond the
clear about
transparency and the research methods, if this research and this historical data were available, were this, in a perfect world, brought to court, obviously the investigating officer, the prosecutor, the court would be able to bolster their case and speak to patterns, speak to history, and actually find some justice.
Such an important point, Gareth, and that's where we need to look at when we address this from a complex systems perspective, right? I mean, we all have blind spots, and we all don't always know when we don't know, and I think research is a part of that. And you're right. So, when the public, when the media pick up on a bad research study that says, well, human trafficking is hardly encountered, that makes its way into the Constitutional Court in a recent example in September in 2020, where a report was shared with Judge Mogoeng that says, well, human trafficking is not a problem. So there's a huge responsibility on the research community to get this right. And fundamentally, it flows over in how police do their crime analyses, how we allocate resources and prevent this crime. So there is some challenges, and we need to reconfigure the way forward.
And I couldn't agree more, and I'm so glad that maybe this conversation is a way of just restarting that reconfiguration. Doctor, I always appreciate your time. It's wonderful talking to someone with your knowledge base. Dr. Marcel Van Der Ross from the University of the Free State. You'll see, by the way, he's over in Washington, D.C. It's a good time of year to be over there, but it's all to do with what is happening as far as research by various organizations, including USAID. We didn't even get a chance to talk about secondary victimization and why victims of human trafficking and terrible other crimes are not coming forward when it comes to anything involving sex trafficking in our country. I'm sure I'll speak to the doctor again and we can raise that particular issue.